We define a watershed as the area where all precipitation will drain down and flow out of one common point. Think of a watershed as a bowl, and if you have two bowls that are adjacent to each other, and if you take a cup of water and you pour it over the edge of the two bowls, part will go into one, part of the water will go into the other, and that's effectively, two different watersheds. The Saratoga Lake watershed would incorporate part of the eastern part of Saratoga Lake and part of the southern part of Saratoga Lake. It's very narrow in those areas. And then it would cover a large part of the western part of Saratoga County, and mainly the Cateros Creek watershed. Cateros Creek watershed is probably about 95% of the area.
As far as I know, the only significant water bodies that are actually in the watershed that are lakes rather than streams or ponds are Wolfberry Lake, which is our current drinking water supply, which is, the outlet is one of the streams that goes then subsequently into Lake Lonely, and then Lake Lonely has a water quality that's not quite as good as some of the other lakes in our area, and also is very close to Saratoga Lake in terms of its outlet feeding the Cateros Creek.
The geologic history of the watershed, it's multifaceted. The rocks that make up the bedrock are on the order of 500 million years old. There's a major fault that runs kind of north-south through the watershed, right through Saratoga Springs, and it's actually the fault that's the reason for the springs. And then recently, about 23,000 years ago, there was about a mile of ice over the watershed. And then as the glacial ice melted, there was a large lake called Glacial Lake Albany. And from that glacial lake and the different deglacial processes going on, it deposited the sand in the eastern part of the watershed. And then those characteristics spill off into how the county was settled and where people decided to live. It also dictated where there were falls for mills and so forth, and where different industry could have been developed. And it also even dictates where you want to drop a line and go fishing.
Saratoga Springs has a tremendous growth rate, one of the top 2 or 3 in all of New York State. Obviously, there's compromises to development and growth. You try to minimize what those impacts might be as best you can through a planning process, but nevertheless, no matter how well you plan, you can't make it as good as it once was before development and increased population occurred.
I think developers get painted sometimes with a bad, they get a bad rap, and by and large, I go to those meetings all the time. Most of them try to do a nice job. Most of them, want to drive by something and say, geez, I was involved in that, We built those houses. We designed those houses to look this way. We left this open space. We left those trees. And they try to do the best they can. I'm not going to say all of them are great, because in every field, there are people that are below average. Half of them are below average. But, when I go and I see some of the things that are approved, it's some pretty nice stuff, and mostly stuff that people want to be proud of.
We really are not in the business of restricting people's ability to develop their own land. Much of our concerns have to do with, the hazardous waste sites in the area, the amount of blacktop that's going in. We think it's very important, if they're going to put in blacktop, to also put in some sort of buffer. And as I said, I don't mind if people develop, but I think we need to direct it towards smart development.
You can't reduce the number of rooftops that are already here or the number of paved driveways. To a certain extent, you can't control growth if you have buildable areas that are suitable for building. if they meet the subdivision regulations of the municipality, you're kind of obligated to allow that to happen. So that being said, I think what you need to do is to try to make sure that development takes place in the best possible, in the most environmentally suitable manner, and making sure that certain things are implemented. You know, buffer strips along streams that will filter out some of the impurities and you know, the fertilizers and herbicides, pesticides, and runoff from pavement.
That water has to be collected and directed toward outfall areas that have existed for since time began in the city. The primary outfall area for the inner city here, of course, is what we call the Spring Run.
Spring Run starts basically in downtown Saratoga Springs. It runs through a pipe through much of Saratoga Springs, where it's also the storm sewer at that point. So when it rains, you know, things that are on the roads go directly in to the storm sewer, but it's basically Spring Run, which I'm not sure when the city did this, but at some point the city started putting these little seals near the storm sewers downtown that you might want to consider paying attention to. There's these little, like little signs right by the sewer downtown that say things that go into this sewer, you know, go into our surface waters. And that's what they're talking about, because downtown, the storm sewer is Spring Run.
The Cateros has been used for generations here in Saratoga County for all manner of things. You know, agriculture, industry, recreation. I mean, you see it right here. I mean, Kelly Park, it's a park, and people recreate quite a bit. Actually, before you guys got here, there were two guys in a pickup truck with a couple of kayaks that were thinking about putting in, and then changed their mind and went someplace else. But, you know, it's fairly common. And so it's indicative of the way that we interact with water bodies, in particular surface water bodies, not just here in Saratoga County, but anywhere in the United States, anywhere in the world, anywhere people develop, in that you've got highly built up areas that are, you know, have a great impact, a great deal of effect on the surface water bodies. And we tend to ignore that, but use it as a community resource at the same time. So for me, this is sort of like, this is the crux. This is the problem that's involved with this. On the one hand, we acknowledge it, but on the other hand, we ignore it.
But back in the late 70s, I think it was 1979, Saratoga County was petitioned by the Saratoga Lake Property Owners Association regarding what was happening on Saratoga Lake. Just severe aquatic weed infestation, primarily Eurasian milfoil, which again, as I said, was not there about 30 years earlier. And the thing that really caused this to occur was the soaring of much of the drainage basin and the diversion of nutrients, primarily phosphorus and nitrogen, from outfalls that entered tributaries that ended up emptying into Saratoga Lake.
There are definitely reasons to be concerned about the nutrient issue. I mean, there's big differences from lake to lake. Although, you know, let's back up here a little bit on that and remember that in 1976, that county-wide sewage treatment plant was built. And Saratoga Lake, if you look at the longer picture, there's no question Saratoga Lake has improved dramatically since the 60s and 70s because of that sewage treatment plant.